The Eclipse Sovereign, flagship of the Zewaitheri Empire, descended like a black monolith over the human colony of Eden 3. Its hull gleamed with an unnatural luster, absorbing rather than reflecting the sunlight. The colony, a modest outpost clinging to the barren world's red cliffs, lay defenseless beneath its vast shadow. Ethan Carter wiped sweat from his brow, hands streaked with grease as he tightened a final bolt on the settlement's malfunctioning shield generator. The system had been failing for weeks, leaving the colony vulnerable to everything from solar flares to opportunistic raiders. But neither cosmic radiation nor pirates compared to the sheer magnitude of the warship, now blotting out the sky. A planetary-wide transmission crackled through every communicator and speaker, a voice sharp as a blade cutting through static. Humans of Eden 3, you are now under the jurisdiction of the Zewaitheri Empire. Your leadership will report to me immediately. The voice belonged to Queen Velyara, absolute ruler of the Zewaitheri, and a living legend across the galaxy. Ethan had read the reports. An unyielding warlord, a conqueror whose empire stretched across thousands of worlds. If she was here in person, it was not for diplomacy. A column of Zewaitheri soldiers materialized from shimmering energy fields, their armor a fusion of organic plating and shifting plasma currents. At their center stood the queen herself. She was 10 feet tall, her elongated form elegant, yet undeniably powerful. Silver-hued skin caught the light with an iridescent shimmer, and her amethyst eyes, brighter than any human's, held an intensity that could shatter stone. Ethan squared his shoulders as the colony's leader, Governor Rains, hurried forward, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, we— Not you, Velyara interrupted, her gaze already fixed on Ethan. You— Silence thickened around them. Ethan took a slow breath. His heart pounded, but he refused to show fear. He stepped forward, wiping his greasy hands on his jumpsuit before offering a casual handshake. Name's Ethan Carter, he said. I don't do bowing. A murmur passed through the assembled Zewaitheri. Some gripped their weapons more tightly. Others merely gawked. Velyara arched a perfect brow, regarding his outstretched hand as though it were an exotic specimen. Bold, she mused. Then, with deliberate slowness, she grasped his hand. Her fingers were long and impossibly strong, but she did not crush his bones. Instead, she lingered, as if intrigued by the warmth of his touch. Most beings kneel before me, she said. Most beings aren't me. A slow smile ghosted across her lips, though it was unclear whether it was amusement or something sharper. I came expecting submission. Instead, I find defiance. Intriguing. She released his hand and turned, surveying the colony with a critical eye. Your world is fragile. Ethan bristled. It's home, yet it barely clings to existence. You struggle against forces beyond your control. Solar storms, dwindling resources, the ever-present threat of annihilation. Why endure such hardship when you could thrive under Zewaitheri rule? Ethan crossed his arms. Because freedom matters. Velyara tilted her head, studying him with an unreadable expression. A quaint notion. Tell me, would you die for it? Before he could answer, a commotion erupted near the colony's main structure. One of the Zewaitheri soldiers collapsed, his body convulsing. The others rushed to his side, scanning him with advanced bioreaders. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed past the towering aliens and knelt beside the fallen warrior. The soldier's breathing was shallow, his veins darkening with a telltale sign of plasma toxicity, likely a malfunction in his armor's environmental seals. He's suffocating from internal plasma exposure, Ethan said, already pulling a diagnostic tool from his belt. The nearest Zewaitheri commander hissed, You will not touch him, human. Ethan ignored the protest and worked fast, deactivating the compromised plating and stabilizing the soldier's vitals with a burst of localized oxygen. Within moments, the soldier's spasms ceased, his breathing steadied. Velyara knelt beside them, her gaze flicking between Ethan and her soldier. You saved him. Yeah, well, Ethan said, standing. I don't like watching people die. The gathered Zhuai murmured among themselves. The concept of a human, a supposed inferior species, saving one of their elite warriors seemed to rattle their perception of superiority. Velyara rose, stepping closer. You are unlike any human I have encountered. I'll take that as a compliment. For the first time, the queen hesitated. Her eyes, once brimming with imperial certainty, now held something else. Curiosity. Perhaps even the faintest trace of admiration. Finally, she turned to her guards. Take him to my ship. Ethan stiffened. Excuse me? You have caught my interest, she said smoothly. I wish to understand you better. Governor Rains paled. Your Majesty, he's just an engineer. He's not. Velyara silenced him with a glance. He is more than that. Ethan exhaled through his nose, considering his options. He could refuse, but that might end badly for everyone. He could try to run, but that was suicide. That left one choice. Go willingly and play the game on his own terms. He met the queen's gaze. Fine, but I'm not your prisoner. Her smile returned, slow and enigmatic. No, you are my guest. The Eclipse Sovereign was a city in motion, its corridors pulsing with the hum of alien technology. Ethan Carter followed the Zhuai Queen Velyara through its labyrinthine halls, each step shadowed by towering guards in shimmering black armor. The air was thick with ionized energy, the scent of ozone and metal sharp in his lungs. Velyara moved with effortless grace, her silver-hued form towering above him, her stride measured and deliberate. Though she projected an air of calm authority, Ethan sensed something else beneath the surface. Curiosity, perhaps even amusement. At last, they arrived in what could only be described as a throne room, though it lacked the gaudy opulence Ethan had expected. Instead, the chamber was a study in sleek functionality. Polished metal walls lined with shifting holographic data streams, a massive viewport revealing the void beyond. At the center stood a single obsidian chair, more command station than throne. Velyara turned, regarding him with unreadable amethyst eyes. Do you understand why you are here, Ethan Carter? He crossed his arms. Because you're curious. You want to know why I didn't bow, why I saved your soldier. You want to figure out what makes me tick. A slow smile curved her lips. You presume much. Am I wrong? She studied him for a long moment before gesturing to a hovering silver sphere, which projected a floating interface of shifting Zhuai symbols. Sit, she commanded. Ethan hesitated before lowering himself onto a curved bench, his muscles tense. The sphere pulsed, scanning him in soft waves of violet light. Biometric analysis, Velyara explained. I wish to understand your physiology. Your kind is resilient. Ethan snorted. You say that like it surprises you. It does? She clasped her hands behind her back. Most species collapse under pressure. They kneel, they beg. Humans? You endure. Even when survival is unlikely, you fight. It is inefficient. Ethan leaned back, studying her. Inefficient, maybe, but it's why we're still here. Velyara's gaze flickered. You defied me on Eden 3, not out of arrogance, but principle. That is unusual. You don't get a lot of people standing up to you, do you? She tilted her head, considering the question. Not without consequence. Silence stretched between them, heavy yet charged. Ethan could see the gears turning in her mind, the clash between her imperial upbringing and this newfound intrigue. At last, she gestured toward a holographic display, bringing up a rotating image of a Zhuai battle simulation. Your species should not have survived its wars, its own self-destruction. Yet you did. Why? Ethan frowned. Because we don't know how to quit. Velyara stepped closer, her gaze intense. Strength is measured by control. Power ensures order. Yet you humans seem to thrive in chaos. Explain that. Ethan smirked. Maybe power isn't about control. Maybe it's about influence. Her brow arched. elaborate. You rule through fear, Ethan said, gesturing to the ship around them. Your people obey because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. But fear doesn't last. Sooner or later, someone fights back. Velyara regarded him with a strange expression, one that Ethan couldn't quite place. And what would you propose? Ethan shrugged. Loyalty isn't forced. It's earned. For the first time, Velyara faltered. It was subtle. A shift in her stance, a flicker of hesitation in her gaze. But Ethan caught it. Something about his words had struck a nerve. Before she could respond, the ship lurched violently, alarms blaring through the command deck. A voice crackled over the comms in rapid Zytheri. Velyara's expression hardened. Report. A nearby officer spoke quickly. A rogue asteroid field has shifted course. Impact in 3 minutes. Ethan glanced at the viewport, spotting the jagged fragments of rock hurtling toward them. Your shields can handle it, right? Not at this velocity, the officer admitted. Several sections are vulnerable. Velyara turned sharply. Evasive maneuvers. Wait. Ethan stepped forward. What parts of the ship are at risk? The officer hesitated, then pulled up a schematic. Ethan's stomach dropped. That's the engineering sector. If those asteroids breach it, you're dead in the water. Velyara's expression remained unreadable. Then we will prepare for casualties. Ethan cursed. No! We fix the problem before it happens. Velyara's brow furrowed. Explain. Ethan scanned the layout, then pointed. If we reinforce these shield nodes and reroute power from non-essential systems, we can buy enough time to maneuver out of the field. One of the Zytheri officers scoffed. A human offering tactical solutions? Absurd. Velyara's gaze never left Ethan. Do it? The officer balked. Your Majesty. I said do it. There was no room for argument. The officer scrambled to comply as Ethan rushed to the nearest control panel, fingers flying over unfamiliar systems. The ship groaned as the asteroid field closed in, but the shields flared brighter, absorbing impacts that would have otherwise torn through the hull. Seconds later, the Eclipse Sovereign cleared the danger zone, emerging battered but intact. A tense silence followed. Then, the crew erupted in stunned murmurs. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temples. Velyara approached, her towering form casting a shadow over him. You saved my ship. Yeah, well, Ethan muttered. I don't like dying. She studied him, her gaze unreadable. Then, to his utter shock, she chuckled, a soft, almost musical sound. You continue to surprise me, Ethan Carter. He arched a brow. That a good thing? Her amethyst eyes gleamed. Perhaps, for the first time, the tension between them shifted. No longer just queen and captive, but something unspoken. And for the first time, Ethan wondered if his presence here was not just fate, but the beginning of something far greater. The tension in the Eclipse Sovereign's command chamber was suffocating. The air itself seemed charged with unseen energy, a battle between fate and duty unfolding beneath the cold glow of holographic displays. Ethan Carter stood at the heart of it, unarmed yet unwavering, his brown eyes locked with the piercing amethyst gaze of Queen Velyara. Across from them, the holographic transmission of the Zytheri High Command flickered like an ancient specter. The towering figures of the Imperial War Council loomed, their expressions carved from stone. The eldest among them, Lord Regent Zyphos, spoke first, his voice a slow rumble of disapproval. Your Majesty, the Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. Velyara's jaw tensed. Ethan Carter is no lesser being. He saved this ship, saved my warriors. Zyphos exhaled through his slitted nostrils. And yet you let him walk beside you, speak as though he were your equal. His gaze sharpened. You forget your duty, Velyara. The throne does not tolerate weakness. Ethan felt the shift in the air, the unspoken threat. His fist clenched. If caring about people is weakness, maybe the throne needs to change. The gathered warlords recoiled at his audacity, murmurs of outrage crackling through the transmission. Zypho sneered. Impudent human. Do you truly believe your words hold weight in the Empire? Ethan stepped forward. I think your queen does. Silence fell. The warlords turned to Velyara. A test. A challenge. The queen's expression remained unreadable, but Ethan saw the war raging behind her gaze. For so long, she had ruled through power, through dominance. Now, for the first time, she stood at a crossroads, not just for herself, but for the empire she had sworn to protect. Your Majesty, Zypho said, voice clipped, I ask you once. Cast aside this human and return to your duty, or we will strip you of your throne. Ethan saw her fingers tighten at her sides. He took a slow breath. Velyara, whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice, not theirs. She turned to him, something flickering in her eyes. Then she spoke, her voice steady. I will not abandon him. The declaration was a thunderclap in the chamber. The warlord stiffened. Zyphos narrowed his eyes. Then you leave us no choice. The transmission cut out, replaced by the blare of battle sirens. A fleet of Zy warships had decloaked just outside the Sovereign's range. The Empire had made its decision. Velyara turned sharply to her officers. Defensive positions. Prepare for a warp jump to uncharted space. One of her commanders hesitated. Your Majesty, if we flee, we may never return. The Queen's voice did not waver. Then we forge our own path. The first barrage struck before the words had even faded. The Sovereign shuddered under the impact, crimson warning lights flashing as the shields absorbed the brunt of the attack. Ethan grabbed onto the nearest console, his pulse spiking. Velyara, we won't outrun them without cover. She turned to him. Suggestions? Ethan pulled up the star map, scanning rapidly. Then he found it. A nebula dense with electromagnetic storms, just beyond the system's outer belt. There. If we get inside, their sensors will be blind, but we have to move now. The Queen did not hesitate. Helm, set course. The Eclipse Sovereign surged forward, engines flaring, the enemy fleet in relentless pursuit. The ship rocked violently as another blast struck the aft shields. Sparks rained down from overhead conduits, and warning klaxons howled like dying beasts. Then the nebula. The moment they plunged inside, the ship's systems flickered. Readings scrambled. But so did the enemies. They can't track us in here, Ethan said, breathless. We're safe. A tremor cut him off. Velyara's eyes darkened. No, not yet. The ship groaned as an elite Zy boarding craft latched onto the hull. The enemy had anticipated their move. The warlords hadn't come to negotiate. They had come to eliminate a traitor. Velyara unholstered her blade, a curved weapon of shimmering plasma, and turned to Ethan. Stay close. The battle erupted the moment the bulkhead breached. Zy warriors poured in, their obsidian armor gleaming in the flickering emergency lights. The clash of plasma weapons and kinetic rounds filled the air. Velyara moved like a storm, her blade cutting through the enemy ranks with ruthless efficiency. Ethan, weaponless, did what he did best, adapted. He ducked low, using the chaos to his advantage, grabbing a fallen soldier's shock baton. He wasn't a fighter, but he was an engineer. He knew how to use leverage. One attacker lunged. Ethan sidestepped, driving the baton into the gap beneath their helmet. A surge of electricity sent them sprawling. Another charge, and Ethan grabbed a loose power conduit, yanking it free and sending a pulse of energy arcing through his attacker's armor. The battle was brutal, relentless, but they fought together, Queen and human, side by side. Then, silence. The last warrior fell, and only the hum of failing power systems remained. Velyara exhaled, her silver skin streaked with violet blood, her blade still glowing with heat. She turned to Ethan, chest rising and falling, something unreadable in her gaze. You fight well, she said at last. He huffed out a tired laugh. Not bad for a fragile human, huh? A rare smile ghosted across her lips. But before she could speak, the intercom crackled. Your Majesty, we have escaped the nebula. Velyara inhaled deeply. They had survived, but they were exiles now. She turned to Ethan. You gave up your home for this. He met her gaze without hesitation. Wasn't much of a home if it meant letting good people die. Something shifted between them then, not just respect, but something deeper. Unspoken, yet understood. Velyara stepped closer. The ZY Theory will hunt us now. Ethan smirked. Then we'd better make sure they never catch us. She studied him for a long moment, then extended a hand. Not as a queen commanding a subject, but as an equal offering partnership. Ethan clasped it. A silent agreement. A new beginning. Far beyond them, the stars stretched wide, infinite and untamed. A galaxy waiting. Together, they would reshape it.